Welcome to Bridging Chicago, a podcast that aims to connect our listeners to Chicago's business, community, cultural, and charity leaders. Brought to you by SATC Solutions L3C. You can connect with us on Instagram or Twitter, where our handle is @BridgingChicago. For more information, including our email, visit us online at satcsolutions.com. Be sure to rate and subscribe to Bridging Chicago on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this podcast. Bridging Chicago.
Hi, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. We're hoping you enjoy the video podcast so far. We've certainly enjoyed being able to see our guests face to face, even if it's not in the same room, because we're obviously still recording these virtually to follow all CDC protocol, and we want to make sure our guests are safe. So we are remotely recording, but it's at least good to see faces again. So we're happy for that. Today we're welcoming in Pongee Barnes, and Pongee is one of those people who we look at what we looked at a program that she was doing, a group that she started called Little Owners, which we'll talk about later, a company that she started there. And we were really excited about that. But then we get deeper and deeper and deeper into what you're doing. And it's like, wow, you're doing a ton of amazing things. And so there's a lot to talk about, but we're really excited to do that. And so thank you for joining us today, Pongee.
Thank you for inviting me.
I do like to start off talking about where you're from. And it's always interesting when we get Chicagoans on the show, because we are a Chicago-centric podcast, but a lot of people have moved here, obviously. But I understand that you were raised here in Chicago.
Yes, I was raised on the south side of Chicago. I currently still reside on the south side of Chicago, but I was raised like 103rd Street near like the high school of Julian. So that's the high school that I attended. So I was raised in that area. And my parents, I grew up in a two-parent household. My dad, he worked for the city. So he worked as a mechanic for CTA. And then he also had a small like auto repair shop where he also had his own business, like on 69th Street, like very close off the expressway exit. And then my mom, she also worked in the business, but now she's a CPS teacher. So I grew up right on the south side of Chicago, and it was weird because I grew up middle class, but I was surrounded by a lot of poverty.
Yeah.
So it was just odd growing up because you see so much like lack, but then you have like a comfortable lifestyle and you're able to attend private schools or go on vacations, and then some of your friends don't have that same lifestyle. So that was an interesting part of my childhood.
I do have to ask, did your dad ever get to drive a train?
Oh, I'm sorry, I broke up. What did you say?
I do have to ask, did your dad ever get to drive a train? Because that's like a secret goal of mine.
No, he strictly worked on buses. So that was his only job, is to repair the buses. So I remember visiting, like, because he worked at so many different stations, they would move him around a lot. But I just remember visiting and going on those little bus rides around inside of the actual warehouse where they help the buses that need to be repaired. So that was a big part of my memories growing up.
Well, for people who don't know maybe much about Chicago, this is a very segregated city. It's really neighborhood based. And so a lot of people who live in a neighborhood don't go outside of that neighborhood all that much, or at least a lot of their social interactions happen within that neighborhood. So can you tell us about your neighborhood and what it was like for you to grow up there, and what your friends were like there?
Yeah, so I grew up in, it's so weird because they change it. Like, I think it was called Roseland, but now they like saying that it's in Washington Heights. So it's like on the edge. So Roseland, Washington Heights. But basically just a lot of dilapidated houses. Just seeing like, we lived on a main street. So there was like really no quiet. Very, very busy urban street where you have like prostitutes walking up and down the street, drug addicts, you hear gunshots. It was very interesting, and always, something going on. We had family that lived close to us, and just they also had a middle class lifestyle. My uncle was a firefighter. His my aunt is a teacher. So combined and you with those salaries, it gives you the ability to do things. But then you look around you and you look at a house that's the roof is falling through, or you go to school with kids who didn't have their last meal was when they left school yesterday in the afternoon. So you hear those stories, you see the children that want, and it's just a weird way to grow up, because you find yourself putting yourself on a pedestal, and it's just not reality in some ways, because it's like you're comparing yourself to people that have a really low poverty level and making yourself seem like you have an advantage, and then you realize that when you grow up, these kids had no say in being brought into this world, and they suffered because they lacked so much growing up. And so I look back and that's why I give back so much, because I know that what I saw growing up, I feel like kids need to have that exposure to other things besides, like you said, some don't come outside of their neighborhood.
Yeah.
So that has always stuck with me, and that's part of my mission.
Do you feel like that,
even with real estate? So
yeah.
Yep.
Do you feel like that was a part of your family mission back then too?
Yeah, so my parents were very big in the idea of trying to revitalize the neighborhood around us. So they felt like they didn't want to move to a better area because they wanted to actually help the neighborhood become better. So yeah, I definitely think that was part. My grandmother felt that way. That was really rooted in us. Like, well, you don't want to leave the hood. Why don't you make the hood better, right? And so yeah, that was definitely something that we believed in.
Yeah. It's so cool to have family in that area and to, to just be a part of that. I grew up in a small town, so Chicago has been a mystery to me for a long time. It's always like the big city, and, even living here now, it just is crazy to me. Pre-COVID, I live off a stop where from 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people getting off the train at the stop, and I just look around, I'm like, this is crazy. But it's such a vibrant city, and I just love that so much.
Yeah, it very much is, but it also is a tale of two cities, just like they said. You have the lack, and then you have the people that are flourishing and they're living in prosperity. So yeah, I mean, Chicago, it's funny, even when I describe real estate, I always tell people that, like, you can go on one block and it's manicured and everyone's working and it's very, safe. And then you can go 2 blocks down and it's scary. It's like now you're in gang territory. So Chicago can be very, polarizing. Yeah.
And I think that is really awesome. But I think in the past, at least, it has also kind of created that divide and kind of deepened those racial roots a little bit, where maybe people feel like they have to kind of protect their territory because it's been taken over and they've been pushed out a little more. And I used to live in Old Town, and I lived off of Sedgwick. And Sedgwick is a street where it's much like that, where, like, on the east side of Sedgwick, that's the Old Town people think about, where it's like at the bars and you go to the beach and everything. And then on the other side is the housing projects, and it's like crazy. It's literally the street that separates that. And it was really interesting to me because if you were safe and you went into some of that area, it's like some of the places to eat and some of the places to visit and the community centers that are there. Like, there's so much fun to be had. Just like anywhere else, you just have to be aware of your surroundings.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that it just also shows how, politicians have not helped to bring more vibrancy to some other communities. Like you said, like, some other communities have community centers and they have lakes and they have nice parks and things, and then you go to these other neighborhoods and the schools have been closed down, The parks are not kept up. The grasses, I remember my dad even complaining to me last year. We were at the park near my home and it was manicured, and he was telling me, in my neighborhood, the grass is up to here and I don't know who to call
Mm.
because this is just ridiculous. So it is definitely, you will see it depending on where you are in Chicago.
Yeah. And obviously your heart must be there because you're still there now.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is there something that brought you back there after going to college? You actually went to college in Southern Illinois, which I think is so interesting because
Yes.
most people don't know that exists. But you went to college in true Southern Illinois, not where people think I'm from Southern Illinois when I'm from like Bloomington Normal area, but you
Oh,
went
okay.
to actual Southern Illinois. So
4.5, 5 hours out. Absolutely. Yes. Very country. Yes.
yeah, but kind of experiencing something very different and then coming back. What was it that brought you and your heart back to the city and to that area?
Well, I like living close to my mom, but I don't live like in that area anymore. I'm still like 20 minutes away, but I'm on the south side of
Okay.
Chicago. So I wanted to be still close to my parents. So the area that I live in is much safer. I live in Beverly now, so it's not too far from where my parents live. And it's much safer. The schools are better, and almost every other person is a cop in this neighborhood. So, I like raising my children here. My husband is a North Sider. It took him a while to embrace the South Side because he is from Evanston and all of his family are still North Siders. So they're like, when are you guys going to come back over to the North Side? But, I like the South Side of Chicago. I don't know if I'll ever move to the North Side of Chicago, but yeah, that I think just being close to family is what really brought me back. But yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what you studied in college, because I'm always interested to hear what people studied. It's one of those times where it's like you're making this huge decision at 17, 18 years old, and
Yeah.
it's always interesting to see how people come about that. So tell us about college for you.
Okay, so most people are very surprised to hear that when I went to college, I went for mortuary science. And even my parents were caught off guard. And they're like, why do you want to be
Okay.
an undertaker? Why do you want to be a mortician? And so I think I was fascinated with the show. I don't know if you remember, but HBO had a show. Basically, they kind of just talked about people working in the morgue and what it's like. And I was fascinated by that. And I was like, that's what I want to be. And so I actually picked SIU because that was the only program that was like at the top to be like to graduate with a mortuary science degree and, go into that field. So that's actually why I chose that. And the first year when we had to actually go with the cadavers, I think that was the time I walked right to my college advisor and changed I actually changed my major because I was like, when they started explaining what we had to do and the idea that like I had to pick up this I just couldn't do it. I was like, what was I thinking? So I called my parents. I'm like, I can't. So I eventually went and signed up for political science is actually what I decided to major in. So because I also thought I was going to be a lawyer like you. And so I actually, my parents had told me I was going to be a lawyer since I was a little girl. Like, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a lawyer. And so I was like, well, I'll just try that. And so I did the political science route. And I graduated with the degree for that, a bachelor's degree for that. And then I kind of went and did like a business in real estate, like staging. And then I went to law school. And I did a year of law school. And I did not like it. I said, I do not want to do this. I had a baby. And you know what? I honestly think that if I had went to law school like my friends straight out of college, I probably would have finished the 3 years. But I think because I waited till I was 25 years old and I had a 1-year-old, I think I was just overwhelmed. Like, oh my gosh, like this is a lot. So yeah, that was like my path. And then I just realized how much I just love real estate. So yeah.
Yeah, you obviously have a passion for real estate, and I think it's great sort of where you've let it take you, because it seems like you kind of started in one place and were just like, okay, I'll do this next thing now. And so let's talk about where you started, because I read this and I'm sure it's true, but it's kind of crazy to me is that you bought your first property when you were in college.
Yes. So junior in college, and I've always been like an entrepreneur. Like I said, my dad, entrepreneur, and so when I was young, he gave me the book. I think I was 13 years old. Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think most entrepreneurs read that book, and it had a light bulb moment. And so for me, even in college, I didn't have a job, so I would always be selling shirts, selling stuff on eBay, like doing other things. So when I started watching like HGTV and TLC, I noticed that they were doing flipping shows. And so we were at the boom of the market. And so I was like, these people are doing it, why can't I? And so honestly, like I thought this TV stuff was real. So I was like, I know I can buy some property and get 100K, right? And so basically because of the way during that time when it was a boom, the way that, you know, the loans were set up, they just took my eBay paperwork and they were like, oh, okay. And they let me buy a house. And so I bought a condo in Chicago in the Beverly community. And I flipped that condo, and it was a disaster. I didn't make any money. I walked away, actually bringing the check to closing. It was ridiculous. So it was very discouraging. But yeah, I actually did buy it in college because I was thinking, this looks easy. So yeah, I've learned a lot of lessons since then.
Yeah. But even kind of going through that and realizing, okay, it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be, but still having the courage to buy a second property is sort of very close to that time. That took a lot of guts.
Well, you know what? I don't think it took guts because the way I'll explain why it doesn't take guts. So that property, when I was holding the first property, I was in a contract to sell that property. And so I saw a second one in the building while I was under contract on my first one. And I was like, oh, we'll do it again. Because in my mind, I'm still calculating, thinking I'm going to walk away with money. So my husband and I, we put money on another one and to buy that one. And so by the time the closing happened for the first one, we were like, well, we gave our earnest money and we're so close to closing, we're going to lose our money. So yeah, it wasn't brave at all. It was just kind of like, I don't want to lose any more money. But the good thing that came out of it was that we actually made money on that deal. And it kind of really put our trust in real estate again. Because honestly, I thought it was a scam. When my attorney called me and said, hey, this thing can't close until you bring some money, I was like, I was pissed, so, to say the least. So yeah.
What was the big lesson there then in those two kind
know
of...
your numbers. Know your numbers. Definitely. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
I would encourage you, if you are thinking about purchasing property or you want to learn more about real estate, I would encourage you to buy Pongees Book, because I bought it and have been listening to it, and I think it's great. And for me, it takes a process that is very daunting and very involved. And I work at a law firm where we do real estate law. I don't do like commercial law that much, or like real estate purchases and sales transactions. I don't do a lot of that. But still, I work around people who do it, and obviously they're always willing to answer questions. But it took this concept for me and made it to be like, oh, I can do this, because it wasn't that it simplified it so much, but it put it in a way where it was like a step-by-step thing of like, at this step, these are the things that you want to know. These are the things that people aren't necessarily telling you right off the bat. And so it made you think about things in a way that it's like, okay, now that I've thought it through, now that I understand these things a little more, I can do that. And it's okay if I go there and they're telling me, oh, this is what you need to do. It's like, okay, now I'm familiar with that. And your book, Real Estate and Chill, is a great resource to me. And so tell me about the book a little bit. So
the book was inspired because my brothers, they're like maybe 6 and 8 years younger than me, and they were always asking me about getting into real estate. And then they would give their friends my numbers, and they would be like, hey, you can call her and see about real estate. So I got sick of explaining this whole process. I was actually recommending books for them to read, and I felt like they weren't reading, because when they would come back, I'd be like, well, why didn't you read, like, that was in the book? You wouldn't have to ask
Yeah.
me that if you actually read the book. And so I was like, I'm gonna write a book that will reach millennials, right? Because I felt like maybe sometimes the real estate books can be for people that are like in their mid-30s or like older and more experienced. So I was like, well, let's have a title and let's make a book like kind of based on my experiences. What I've went through is not the be all and end all of real estate, but it's just my experience and kind of simplifying the process and making it relatable to millennials. And so that's how we came up with Real Estate and Chill. So I just talk about basically financing, Section 8, which is my favorite. I love Section 8. We talk a little bit about flipping. We talk about making your unit tenant friendly. There's a lot in there. So yeah, definitely pick it up.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon if you want to check out anything about real estate.
Yeah, and for me, it was one of those things where you learn things that it's kind of like a myth buster in some ways. It's like because
cool.
with the Section 8 stuff, unfortunately, there is a stigma there, and I think when people hear Section 8, they automatically turn to the row houses down here or Cabrini Green, and they're like, why would I ever want to own something like that? It's going to get destroyed. It's going to get whatever. That is not Section 8. That is not the case with what could happen for every person's experience. And I think the disclaimer a little bit is you never know what you're going to get, because renters, you're renting it out. Like, you could be renting it out to people who make $100,000 a year, and they could destroy your property.
I agree.
So you just really never know. But the book to me did some myth busting, because it's number one, busting the myth of I can't do this, and number two, busting the myth of owning this kind of property is better than owning that kind of property simply because it's Section 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think people always say that, and I laughed. I put on my Instagram, I said, I guess I get the last laugh now because I'm still getting my checks while a lot of you are crying that your market tenants aren't paying. And so, yeah, I feel like with Section 8, you just have to screen. It's really important to screen. I talk about a list of like red flags in terms of, dealing when you're dealing with tenants. But yeah, I feel like in my experience, I haven't had that experience where someone's come in and put holes in my wall, torn my doors down, had a whole, meth lab or some type of traps, house. And so I haven't had that experience, but I know that when people talk to me, like, why are you dealing with those type of people? Why do you want to do that? It seems like a headache. But there are some very good, hardworking people. Most of my tenants that are Section 8 have jobs. That's another thing. Like, they think that they're at home sitting on their butt. I can't tell you how many times I've been to the local stores around where I live, and my tenants are working at the local Home Depot or at the Dollar Tree, and they're the cashier. So that is another misconception. Most of them have to bring in some type of income to be able to, stay on to Section 8. So I feel like a lot of them are respectful. Have I had some bad experiences? Yes, a couple of them. But for overall, I will say that these people are just looking for a nice, safe place to live with their children and eventually do better, go to school. A lot of them are also taking classes. So I have another perspective about Section 8, and I don't think that these people are that bad.
Yeah, and we know that shelter is one of the basic needs, but not just as a basic need, but to provide generational wealth, people have to know that they can be housed and they don't have to worry about being on the street the next day or the next month or whatever. And so can you tell us a little bit about the housing system in Chicago? Has the system of housing and mixed income or low income housing, has that improved over time? Do you see now it's better for people in Chicago who maybe can't afford to just go out and rent a place on their own?
I mean, for me, I look at the rental rates, and it seems like it's becoming more unaffordable to live in Chicago. And I think we can look at the numbers and see that living in Chicago is very expensive, and the rent is just really expensive. And so I mean, I have places, I have investment properties in very poor communities, like, for instance, one in the West Pullman area. Like, near off of Halsted, very depressed area. Bought this house very cheap, and even the rent for this little house is like $1,200. But like, it's, even I really don't want to even drive in there when but I have to sometimes. But I say that to say that because you can even find stuff in Inglewood that's like $1,500-$1,600. And so how can you even justify these rent prices when people are still ducking and dodging bullets? They still have food deserts. They still don't have access to good health care. We just got a trauma center, I think, on the south side, finally on the south side of Chicago. So people were getting shot in Inglewood and had to be transported all the way, like maybe 20, 30 minutes away to Oak Lawn. That's a suburb right outside of Chicago. And so it was just really ridiculous. So now we are starting to see some of those resources come, but they're not coming fast enough. We still have food deserts. We still have people that don't have access to things that other people have access to. And I think housing is really kind of getting out of hand, to be honest. Even looking at, and I know right now we're going through a real estate boom, so I'm not even going to talk about like how crazy the prices are in Chicago and how I look at cranes and they're sending me headlines that say it looks like the market is going to go up even higher when spring hits. So the market is ridiculous in terms of purchasing. But I just think as a renter, and to be able to live here and with the minimum wage at the way it is, to me, it just is not something that is affordable at all and sustainable. So I think that, there's been a long history of redlining. There's been a long history of just, people of color being locked out of the system in certain places, especially when you talk about the city hiring. There's like lawsuits against the fire department because, not hiring enough black firemen. So many sectors, the water department, where so many black employees have been on the radios and different media platforms screaming about the discrimination that they're receiving at the water department. So, I hope that, on the horizon, we see better opportunities for people, that are definitely disenfranchised in this city. But yeah, for me, I don't understand how you can justify the housing and what they're offering. And I do love the fact that Lightfoot has been able to offer like rent stimulus, because that has helped out a lot of landlords. Because I'm in groups where they actually are applying and receiving checks from the city of Chicago for back rent. So I love that program because there's some real need out there for sure. So I do love that, but I just feel like there's not enough resources to help close that gap with the poverty and the middle class. Like, I just don't see it, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that one of your goals is likely to help people build that generational wealth, where it's not just having the ability to take care of their needs, but to allow their families to thrive and to flourish and to give back. And so for you, and maybe you can speak on this on your own family a little more, but how do you look at that, and how do you say, okay, with what we're doing right now, this isn't just a now thing, but we want this to be good for our family and for the city for a long time to come?
Yeah, for us, we really try to immerse our children into the process, right? So we know that there are studies that show that generational wealth will go away in one generation if the children do not understand how to take care of the wealth that's been left to them. So I refuse to, have my children be in a state where we pass away and they basically squander everything that me and my husband has worked for. So we like to take them, when we're looking at properties to purchase it, we'll take them. Sometimes we'll even like go over the books with them and talk about, rents received and things like that. We talk about, we're going over our trust right now. So the kids are very involved even in the trust, and we talk about the guidelines and what they have to do to actually earn their their inheritance. And so we do not, even though it's not guaranteed, they could still, blow everything, go buy a Bugatti. Hopefully they don't. But I mean, we at least are trying to lay the groundwork, right? And so we tell them about passive income. For Christmas, they got a vending machine. So we're trying to teach them, like, there's different, you want to have several streams of income. The idea that they can put their favorite snacks in a machine and then come back a week later and collect some money for it. Trying to teach them things like that. Also, even when we're renovating, we'll have them do like a small tile job with my husband supervising them. So if you see a backsplash, my kids probably did it. But yeah, like we try to like instill work ethic and just also having those real conversations with them about, when you are left, you have a big responsibility. Not only will you have an inheritance, but it comes with great responsibility, and you are not to squander this in just one generation, and your children don't have what I left to them. So that's how we're doing, and that's why we have our books for children, so other parents can get on board and start building generational wealth.
And how old are your children?
They are 7 and 10. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it's never too early, really.
No, absolutely not. Not for us. We think that they can, if they can, once they start talking and learning how to like count, I think you should introduce, simple, foundational vocabulary words and simple things about money management.
Yeah. It's one of those things I think we all wish we were taught a little more in school, is how to manage a bank account and how to, save and spend money. And unfortunately, at least when I was in school, it wasn't really taught. And so, we had to learn how to do other silly things that I don't think I've done since.
Right. It's still not taught. My children are in school and it's still not taught. So there is a huge gap, and I really just don't want to see another generation of kids fall into that same trap. I don't want to see my children walk onto a college campus and sign up for 50 credit cards, and I don't want to see anybody else's children do that. So it's really about changing the narrative and really introducing these concepts early so that they don't make those same mistakes when they grow up and become of age.
Yeah. You mentioned the books that you've written for kids, and these are obviously inspired, and I think co-written by your sons, right?
Yes.
Which is awesome. Yes. And so these books are really cool, and these here, Valerie the vendor and Vinny the vendor, we can see how those were inspired by the vending machines.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's like Steven the sports agent and Sierra the salon owner. It just makes it so real, where it's like, oh, who wouldn't want to do some of these things, be a salon owner, the real estate investor, the franchise owner. And so the books to me seem like I'm going to buy a pack. I have 8 nieces and nephews, and I think you have an 8-pack in here, which is awesome. So I'm like,
yes.
It's like these are really just, they seem to be very simple ways to get the interest going. Because I think that's the big thing, is if you can get kids interested, they want to know everything. That's
the key. Absolutely. And so that's what the books are inspired by. Just to, I actually was asked to speak that was 2 years ago in 2019 at a school in Inglewood. And the principal was giving Entrepreneurship Day. And to me, that was like revolutionary, because when I was growing up, it was Career Day, and it's just like firefighter and a cop, and So I thought it was so cool that she was like, I want Entrepreneurship Day, and I want all Black entrepreneurs in the gym room talking to kids about being an entrepreneur. So someone invited me, and so I thought that was so that inspired the book. So when I walked out of that gym room, I was more inspired by those children than they were by me or any of those other people. So I felt like it was troubling to me that they would only get this on a 1 year a day, like 1 year out, 1 day after year. So that was like something that really bothered me. And I was like, how can children have access to entrepreneurship on a daily basis? And that's really when the books, it was just like, it came to me. And so I started with my own children, with Ben the banker, with Franklin the franchise owner, and just it kind of grew from there. So we just take different careers that are entrepreneurial, and we put make them like children characters, and we put them in the book. And most of our characters now are Black, but we're planning on expanding, different to make it more diverse. But that's pretty much the premise. Is just I just I drove out of that community and I was like, they're going to walk out this gym room and see all this, this lack around them. And I wanted
Mhm.
to enrich their lives as best as I could. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love it because to me that's a really lasting impact. That's something where it's not fixing a temporary issue. It has the real potential of making a lasting impact, because obviously you're getting them reading, which is great, but you're also getting them thinking, which is even better, and hopefully dreaming too.
Yes. So that's we've heard from so many parents, and it just warms my heart when people say, "Oh, well, my kid wants to be a sports agent now because he loves sports. He's not good at it, and he didn't know that he could do something like that." Or, now my daughter wants to be a salon owner or a real estate investor, and so that is just like so rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really the heart of Little Owners, if I'm understanding it, is just entrepreneurship for kids and getting them to. I mean, I wouldn't have known what that word is before I was in high school or whatever.
Most kids, exactly.
But I think it's great.
No
and so the heartbeat is really just introducing it as early an age as possible. Then.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so cool that you're doing that work, and I'm sure that the parents are really loving it. So
yes,
thanks for doing that.
Now we're applying so that we can become CPS vendors, so we can get into the school system. So we have some parents that may not be able to afford a book, but what happens is CPS can partner with us and we can get books to all of the students. So that's definitely our goal.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, definitely keep us posted on that, because we'll let people know when that's available, because we love that it keeps growing, and that's awesome.
Thank you.
So it's really cool having you here, because we get to go back to the roots of our podcast a little bit, because in our first season we were a real estate focused podcast, and we've done some here and there, but now we've focused a lot on leadership and journey stories. But I do want to talk a little bit about real estate, because I think our listeners will enjoy going back there a little bit. And so tell me about what you see in the state of the market right now, or sort of where you see the market is, or trending maybe.
Yeah, so for me, I'm not in the market to purchase at all, because I really feel like this is a bubble. And so the prices are very inflated, and some of it is just, I know that people are going to buy and have buyer's remorse in a year, because the values are going to just drop. There are definitely people that disagree with me and think that, these values are going to sustain themselves. I do not agree with that. So for me, I'm sitting out right now. I'm just kind of working on one of my rehab projects. I have a multi-unit property. And so there's a commercial, two storefront commercials and a upstairs apartment. So I'm just, renovating that. My brother and I co-own that together. And so that property is in Auburn Gresham. He is putting a smoothie shop there to bring a healthy option, because in that neighborhood, there's nothing but fried chicken, fried food everywhere, fast food everywhere. And so he is basically partnering with somebody to bring a smoothie shop there. And so that will be also, the other storefront will be the home of Little Owners. And then we'll rent the apartment upstairs out. But for us, we are sitting tight. And then also, to be honest, I think, for my personal real estate portfolio, I'm definitely looking to expand outside of the state. I think the laws can be extremely restrictive here. I would like to look at more like Indiana and Florida, more just landlord friendly states, because here it's constantly, where you feel like if you just do one thing wrong, they can just take your property from you or something. I mean, it's not that extreme, but it's just, I feel definitely restricted here. So yeah, that's kind of where we see it, but we definitely see a very hot market here in Chicago, and I think that's in all areas. Honestly, I'm not even going to say it's just the wealthy areas. I do see a lot of inflated real estate, even in bad areas that are considered bad or whatever, dangerous. Even their prices are high. So I don't know where we can go from here. I I don't know when that's going to taper itself off. I know interest rates are still very low and things like that. So maybe it will take the interest rates rising for the market to kind of cool off. But that's kind of the perspective that I'm looking at. Do you have anything that you've seen in the real estate market?
The reason that it's so interesting to me is because, I'm looking at here soon, starting to look into ownership, because we still rent right now. And for me, I'm the kind of person where I look at it and go like, oh my gosh, how am I going to owe so many hundreds of thousands of dollars on something? Like it's like a knife to my heart. I'm like, I don't like having debt. And so to me, I'm like, how am I going to owe this much money for 15 years? And so I got to get over that first.
Yes, it's good debt. And I think if you bought very smart, like when I buy, I like to walk into equity. So I'm never buying something that like is already renovated and done. I always like to put some sweat equity so that it kind of justifies, it pays for itself. So I would definitely say now is not a good time to buy. Personally, and then I think you should consider something that's a fixer-upper, not a whole reno, because I think that's too much for any new buyer to take on. But if you can take on something that is like, I don't like the kitchen, I want to take the countertops off, or I want to just update the bathroom, I would definitely recommend something like that. But yeah, it can be very daunting to take on that amount of debt. I agree.
Yeah, and I do want Chip and Joanna Gaines to come into my property and turn it into one. Oh man, they're probably great and maybe not so great for real estate, because now everyone wants to do it and thinks they can.
I know.
And it's like the reality of that may not be so.
Exactly. And then she has like a whole design team working behind her. So there's people that think they can actually take on these projects.
I did get to go down to Waco and see her the silos and the stores and everything. And it's, in some ways it's the machine, because you can't do something on that scale just like two people going out and fixing up things. It is and so it's so cool, but the reality sets in a little bit.
Absolutely.
But I think kind of getting to the point to where ownership is becoming more a reality, and one of those things where I don't want to necessarily keep putting in monthly fees for something that I'm not getting any equity out of, not getting any there's no benefit for me out of it outside of that time that I'm living there. Even though I live here downtown and I love our place, it's great. It's actually really a great apartment. It's a little unusual for Chicago because it has a really big like living room kitchen area, and so it's great for pre-COVID when we could have people over and whatever. But and so I feel like that's a little hard to find in apartments, and so that's why it's like, well, if I want to find that again, I may have to actually go out and buy something. So getting there, but still, kind of doing some investigation work.
Yeah, it's a process, and I would not rush the process. So as long as you're kind of you're on the right mindset, so that's good.
And maybe for other people who are thinking about buying or starting to look at buying, can you give us something that maybe we wouldn't necessarily think about looking into or researching or really thinking a lot about before we go into purchasing a new home? Can you give us maybe a little nugget of wisdom as to what you would look at first or early on maybe?
So the first thing I think that just kind of sticks out to me is definitely like the property taxes. So I think I've had like newbies that will get excited about a property being like under $50,000. And then we look at the property taxes and it's like $10,000, $15,000.
Yeah.
So I'm not a proponent of buying in like the south suburbs. I think the property taxes are ridiculous, and sometimes they cost more than the house. So I would definitely look at that. And then if I was buying a condo, I would look at the assessment fees, because you have to keep in mind when you're buying a condo, they start off one way and they go up. And then, my first experience with a condo was being, saddled with these, the fees that basically, I forgot the name of them, but these are fees that are basically, and it's a lump sum payment you pay for things like a roof, if you need brickwork done, if you need window repairs and things like that. And so if I was shopping for a condo, I would talk to the association and ask them when the last time these things were updated, so that you don't purchase and close, and then a month later they're like, well, now we have that's what it's called, a $10,000 special assessment. And so for me, mine was like $7,000. But those are the things that kind of stick out to me, is making sure that you're not going to be saddled with that early on. It's one thing to be there for 5 years and have a special assessment. It's another thing to just close and now they're like, you owe this amount of money, and you haven't really enjoyed the actual building. And then for just single family or multifamily, looking at those property taxes, because something can really be a great deal on paper, but when you add up all of the, when you put in the property taxes and you have to add the insurance and maintenance costs and all of those things, it's not when you look at the math. So take that piece of paper, look at it. And I would say even go a step further. When you're looking, have your agent double check, because I've seen it where people have lied about what the property taxes are because they know that savvy buyers will not even want to look at it.
Wow.
And so they will actually, make it like less than what it is. And then you look it up on the Cook County Treasurer and you can see that it's much more than what they advertised it for. So that's another tip I would say, is checking those things, because property taxes have to be paid every year. They're not going away, and they usually only go up. They don't go down. So
yeah. And it's one of the things that outlasts your mortgage.
Oh yeah. So you have to really keep that in mind. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think it can be a daunting process, but those kinds of things, it's like, okay, that's something I need to remember when I'm looking at the paper. When I think it says, oh, it's 50,000, I can do that. Keep that in mind is really important.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'd like to talk about what your future looks like, or for your hope for the future of not only real estate stuff, but for little owners as well. I know you said it's getting a storefront, which is really exciting, and so guessing you'll be selling some of the books in there. But tell us what the future of little owners and then the Barnes family is looking like.
Yeah, so I think the future of little owners is definitely getting into the school system. So, this last week we were excited because we got our first order from a school system in New York. And they contacted me because they wanted to give books to their students. So we would like to see that throughout the United States. So we'll be working on trying to get those books into the hands of all the children in the schools. So that's what we want to do, especially here in Chicago at CPS. Especially, we know the need, and we know that most CPS students fall below the poverty line. So we know that they actually really need these books. And then also maybe perhaps expanding it to a teen brand. So, because I get so many requests from parents that are like, okay, I have a little kid, but what about my teenager? So I would love to, have something where teenagers could really relate to it and offer them some type of basic foundation, because they really need it, because they're so close to to adulthood. And so I would like to be able to be a resource for parents and for that age group as well. And I think for the Barnes family, just continuing to teach our children about financial literacy, continuing to bring them a part of the journey and let them see the good and the bad and the ugly, especially of entrepreneurship. When I have bad things that happen in the business, I let my children know, because I don't want them to have a glamorized idea of entrepreneurship. Like they see, like mommy, like they Google my name too. And so they see mommy, but there is, there's the good and the bad. And so you deal with customers, you deal with suppliers not coming through and doing what they're supposed to do, and employees. So it comes with everything. And so I try to share that with my children so that they can understand what that's like if they choose to be an entrepreneur when they grow up. And I think that, those are the things that we're focusing on.
And maybe to leave on this, can you share about your hope for the future of Chicago, of the city and its people? Like, what would you like to see for Chicago?
Yeah, for Chicago, I would love to see a city with more equity in terms of like diversity and just more people getting their fair share. What bothers me the most, I think, with Chicago is just this. Sometimes they have this narrative that they want to bring equity among Chicagoans, but the result doesn't look like that. And I think a great example is marijuana. Them touting it as a way to kind of redeem themselves for putting all of these people in jail. And then, now you look at it and there's no Black ownership in marijuana. So for me, I want to see a city that actually does what they say they're going to do and lives up to that. And to see more diversity, like you said, our neighborhoods are so polarized and separated and segregated. And I would love to see kids being able to go to school with other kids that don't always look like them and don't have the same religion and don't have the same background. I think that makes for a better world when we can all just coexist together. So those are definitely some of the things that I hope for Chicago. I hope that we can clean up these neighborhoods and give every child a safe space to be. I hate the idea that some children in Chicago cannot enjoy the summer because they are scared that they will be shot down. So you start to see obesity rates rising because they can't go outside and play because they're scared. So yeah, those are definitely some of my hopes, and I hope I can be a part of that, so yeah.
Yeah, well, we know that you already have been a part of creating change, and I'm really excited to hear about what happens in the future with you and your organization, and we're certainly very grateful for you on the podcast today, coming on and sharing these thoughts with us. It's been great, and so we're really grateful for your time, so thank you for that.
Thank you for inviting me. This was very nice.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solutions Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.